What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico.
Join the stars of the Ancient Aliens TV show. David Childress will guide you through the evidence left behind and the secrets being guarded from mankind. Have artifacts been left on other planets? Mike Barrow will take you to other worlds and explore the truth about the secret space program and the lies NASA tries to hide. What does the UK government really know about UFOs? Former Ministry of Defense UFO investigator Nick Pope will present The Real X-Files. Join Grant Cameron, who will provide detailed disclosure plans the world governments are working to. Or will mankind make contact first through our collective consciousness? One of the world's leading female researchers, Paula Harris, will share incredible testimonies from leading whistleblowers on ET contact and what's next for our world. It's time to believe and raise consciousness. Join like-minded souls on Saturday, June 23, 2018 for Awakening, Bowler's Exhibition Centre, Manchester, UK. Awakening. What do you believe?
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching The Moore Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. Now for the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Paul Blake Smith. Now Paul is the author of MO41, The Bombshell Before Roswell. He was born and raised in MO41's hometown of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Now Paul is a fan of American history and popular culture. He writes original screenplays and other books on largely historical, non-fictional subjects. Now his latest books are The Treasure Keys to Christ's Return and Sexy Alien Races. Paul Blake Smith, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin. It's always a pleasure.
It's great to have you on. My last interview before I head to the States right now, so this is going to be good. Kind of glad with that in a sense. In one respect of having done so many this year, but also quite a little bit sad because obviously that you're the last one. So let's make this a good one. So you've got another book out. Since we last spoke to you, you came on with many UFO books, and now we're going to talk about your previous to last book, which is just tell us what that book's called. Keys to the Christ Code.
It's called The Treasure Keys to Christ's Return, and it's about.
Well, I got that wrong, didn't I?
It's about real life prophecies that all point to the return of Jesus Christ, from psychic channelers and from perhaps Jesus himself 2,000 years ago that you could find in the Bible. And I put them together in a fictional adventure novel. But everything I put in there about conditions leading to the return of Christ are all quite true. And it, in a way, has something to do, a small way to do, with my next book, which is out now, called Sexy Alien Races. It's also a fictional book of why extraterrestrials are allegedly coming here to observe this great change as we head into a new era and the return of Christ. So supposedly, and this gives away everything right up front, that extraterrestrials are observing us. They've been coming here for many millennia, and now more than ever, because they want to see how we are doing on the cusp of this monumental event, where supposedly, according to Edgar Cayce and some other psychics, the Earth is going to shift on its axis and roll over a bit in space and have a new inclination towards the sun and restabilize, and it will be a global event of epic proportion. And in the aftermath, in a spirit of good fellowship and cooperation, mankind will pick up the pieces of this physical calamity and begin to rebuild the earth, and that is when Christ will return. And the whole thing is why we have a number of alien races coming here to visit. They're highly intelligent, they're observing, taking measurements of our environment that we seem to be effectively destroying, and leading up to this great event that even Christ seemed to point to 2,000 years ago before his execution and resurrection.
Right. Okay. Now, when anyone says to me that Christ is returning, I find that really, really difficult in some respects. I mean, and then also, you know, there's many people that say, in my field of channeling, there's a few people that say they're channeling Christ. So it'd be interesting to get one of those on and ask what do they think about what you're saying as well. Also, you know, the idea that Christ is coming back. I mean, well, what if it's more of a Christ consciousness that's coming back to the whole world rather than an actual, you know, person coming back to say, I am the Christ return? What if it's a Christ consciousness return in the way people act to each other?
You know, you could well be right, and that's almost the exact wording another host said to me on an interview very similar to that. It's almost eerie hearing you say that. It could be a consciousness, but Edgar Cayce in particular described Christ coming back. He will walk and talk amongst men in groups and men in small masses, or great masses, I should suppose, and that he will not be harmed. He will reign for 1,000 years. This will be a great era of peace, as foretold in the Bible. He described a number of times that it will be Jesus Christ, and he is coming back. And in her own book, the American psychic Ruth Montgomery, hold that up, there's her picture. She not only agreed with Edgar Cayce, but said once again that extraterrestrials are here to observe this tremendous event, but we'll just see. One thing Edgar Cayce said to look for is upheavals in the Antarctic. And just the other day in the news, we see a gigantic hole opening up in the Antarctic of about the size of the American state of South Carolina. And there are other things happening now. The degrading of the environment, the melting of the ice caps at the poles. Supposedly, we've already shifted a degree or two off of our axis. It's all very scary because it's starting to happen as these psychic sources have foretold, which I can go into if you like.
Right. Okay. So this information based on what you're telling us now is on Ruth Montgomery and Edgar Cayce. Any other kind of channels it's based on?
There's two more American psychics I did not get into in my book, The Treasure Keys to Christ's Return. And that's a man named Aaron Abramson, said the exact same thing. The Earth's going to tilt over in space, and it's coming up in our fairly near future, and that Christ is returning. And another psychic named Paul Solomon, who lived as of 20, 30 years ago. He passed away. Aaron Abramson died within the last 15 years, I think.
Right.
And they both said the exact same thing. They agree with Edgar Cayce. They agree with Ruth Montgomery and her so-called spirit guides that she used to channel and type messages through her in a series of best-selling books. She was a very conservative American newspaper reporter and columnist, and she wrote a series of books that were very critically and well received by the public. And their message was over and over, this great event is coming, and one of the things you need to look for before this great change would be the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in Italy. And so we haven't seen that big signpost yet. But I looked it up, and Mount Vesuvius erupted 3 days before the California earthquake in 1906. Both Edgar Cayce and Ruth Montgomery predicted that Vesuvius will erupt again in a major way, and California will suffer major earthquakes, terrible damage in this period coming up. Who knows when, but when you see Vesuvius start to blow with great gushings of lava, then you know we're in trouble here in America.
Okay. Now, your background, you're not religious of any type, are you?
Not really. I'm not a big church goer. I'm not a big Bible reader. In mid-November, about a week after the election, and last year, I had the most remarkable, stunning experience of my life. I will preface my remarks on this amazing subject by saying there's an American reporter for CNN named Kirsten Powers who reported the same thing. I found out a couple months after my experience. I looked it up online, and it turns out that Kirsten Powers had the same dream at night in which she vividly saw Jesus Christ approach her and speak to her. She was an atheist at the time. She had no interest in Jesus Christ. It really shook her up. She said her dream was just a dream on one hand and yet a very real experience. And that's what happened to me in mid-November of last year. Jesus Christ appeared to me in a dream. He looked right at me and he said, "Remember, Christ is your Redeemer always." And I was just so stunned. I woke up and could barely believe it. It was really him. He had the hair parted in the center and the beard and the bluish gray eyes and the whitish robe. And there was no mistaking it. It was him. And I was just, I'll be honest, I was scared when I woke up. I thought, am I going to die now? Is this what happens at the end of life? Obviously not. So I do believe in Jesus Christ, and that has certainly been reinforced by this experience. And it will be interesting to see if he does come back in a physical form, or as you suggest, in a consciousness within each person. And whether we will have a global event beforehand that will literally shake things up, and that we will have to rebuild society first. But it's all quite fascinating, you must admit. And you have to look at the track record of Ruth Montgomery or Edgar Cayce. Why should we believe them? Well, I could go down a list of things that each one of them said that have come true, and it starts to get a little spooky when you see, for instance, they declared that the Ruth Montgomery Spirit Guide said that the ice caps are going to start to melt. They said this as early as 1971, and continued in books in the 1970s and 80s, warning our weather patterns are getting all messed up here on Earth, and great storms of increasing velocity will happen. People will be scurrying for cover as the decades approach for this polar shift event. And it's all happening slowly but surely, just as they foretold.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously with Edgar Cayce, you've got the ARE Foundation in Virginia. And
right.
The only thing about, I find of of any type of like total addiction to one person's truths is that truths change. So as we progress, we find out new truths, and if I was to go to the ARE and said, "Oh, I think I've got a newer truth than the Cayce material," I don't know if I would be allowed to have that added to into the great library, because it wouldn't be part of Cayce's work. But it's like religion, isn't it? We are not allowed to add newer truths to religion. Therefore, we are stuck at the truth that it was written at a time when it was needed for, not the times that we live in now. So I wonder if we were to get anyone to channel that type of information that Casey channeled before, and what would happen, what would be said about it now? Because also, what if, part of them, or and Ruth and others were picking up on a parallel worlds? Because looking at the UFO subject, that looks into parallel universes as well, interdimensional traveling. So can as channelers we pick up on things that maybe aren't happening to this particular dimension and maybe some other parallel Earth? Could it be that the course that we were on at the time when they channeled it was the course that this event was going to happen, but now because as a collective we've changed our course, maybe, I'm not saying we have, but maybe therefore it's not going to happen just the same?
That's a very interesting theory, and it could well be true. Both Edgar Cayce seemed to point around the year 2000, and so did originally the Ruth Montgomery books of the 1970s and 80s, saying that around the year 1999, 2000, we would have this global event. In her final book that came out in 1999, Ruth Montgomery wrote that her spirit guides sent her messages saying that the polar shift has been pushed back a few decades. It's still in our future, but it was scheduled earlier for 2000 for various reasons. It has been pushed back by God himself. Now, I don't know whether we can believe that, but it's important to know that Ruth Montgomery was not a wild person prone to making wild statements. Again, she was a conservative Republican newspaper reporter. She wrote the First Lady Lady Bird Johnson's biography. She wrote a number of bestsellers. She was a very respected reporter in Washington, D.C. She passed away in the summer of 2001, just a couple of months before the 9/11 attacks. And it's interesting to note that she warned in a book in the late 1980s that terrorists will continue. They will keep on trying to destroy and disrupt our Western civilization. They also warned, watch out for the Russians, that they're going to be up to no good. Now, these are somewhat vague statements, let's admit. However, in a 1985 book, this one right here, Ruth Montgomery's Guides warned that false computer information would be spread using the internet, and it would try to fool people into wrong thinking, just as we are seeing with fake news, as we seem to call it here in America, and the Russian meddling. It kind of adds up to what these spirit guides foresaw all along. And one more thing of what Ruth Montgomery's Guides said as far back as 1979, and this one's a really specific one. They said, we see a big spending liberal Democrat president coming, and he will nearly bankrupt the American economy with the issue over health care, and that people in America would virtually take up arms in revolt against this man. And it sounds exactly like the American Tea Party revolting and firing back figuratively against President Obama and his health care plans, which have just ballooned and soared our national deficit. So they foresaw all of this well in advance. And it's hard to say, well, that was just a fluke or just luck. I mean, they were very specific. So it lends more credence to listening to them in what they have to say about our future, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. Yeah, and also, so when you met Jesus then, or the figure of Jesus in your dreams, which you had no, you had no reference to Jesus before the dream, did you? I mean, you wasn't, a couple of days before there was any prophetic dreams, were there?
Oh my, no. I've never experienced anything before like this, and really not afterwards. It was just took me aback. I was stunned.
So when you woke up,
I'm always open for him to return,
right.
But so far.
But when you woke up, then what led you to write that second book? Then what?
I had the threads of another book to write a fictional book and to put together all of the Ruth Montgomery and Edgar Cayce forecasts and how what I do know of the Bible seems to predict a coming event in very tumultuous times. Jesus Christ on the Mount of Olives warned his disciples, who wrote it down later, that there would be very specific signs to look for his coming, including increasing earthquakes, war, disease, famine. There would be tremendous turmoil in the earth. And before all of that happens, he says, or after all of that happens, he says, "See that you are not troubled, for the end is not yet." He made it sound like something even larger and bigger is coming, which matches up with the Edgar Cayce and Ruth Montgomery prediction for a shift of the earth. Now, as you point out, Kevin, the last ones from Ruth Montgomery happened in the 1999 book, and since that time, obviously 18 years have gone by. Who knows if it's still going to happen as foretold? Maybe more changes are coming. Maybe it's pushed back even further or even canceled. But I thought it made for an interesting book, how everything meshes together, and I created The Treasure Keys to Christ's Return, and it was certainly accepted by my publisher, Argus Publishing, and you can still get a copy today. It's a family-friendly story. But that's when I decided to move along and write a very different book that is currently out in the market, and I can tell you about that one if you like.
Yeah, yep. Let's just keep with the second book, just for a minute. So thank you. So with a pole shift, then, I mean, we're not talking about an event that would just take a couple of weeks to do it. This would be instantaneous if there was a pole shift.
What I gather from what they said it would happen in like the twinkling of an eye. Well, I don't think it'll be that brief, but in a matter of minutes, the Earth would roll over many degrees, but not, like turn completely upside down. And that the new North Pole will be closer to like Greenland, and the new South Pole will be at the tip of South America. And that these areas will, of course, freeze up. Other areas that had been frozen over will see considerable melting, which they already are. And there'll be a new equator. And that, tragically, this unstable event will produce volcanic eruptions. It'll produce extremely high winds, and it will produce earthquakes and tremendous tidal waves. So it will not be safe anywhere near the ocean, the seashore, if you are living around that time. So there will be a number of these smaller scale description events happening in the days leading up to the event, and then it'll really be a gigantic mess. And supposedly extraterrestrials are not only monitoring our build-up to this event, according to the Ruth Montgomery books, they're going to lift off a small chosen number of Earthlings to save them from this destruction. I certainly hope you and I are amongst those, and all of your listeners and followers, but they didn't say it would be in the millions, just maybe a few thousand. And so I know that sounds hard to believe, like Beam Me Up, Scotty, or something from Star Wars or Star Trek, but they swore that this is part of why aliens are here preparing this. They're going to save some of us and then set us back down on the planet's surface, according to the Ruth books, where we'll help rebuild society and create a very peaceful, wonderful world.
Yeah, I mean, whether that's part of Ruth's consciousness coming in there or that is what she was channeling, because whenever you channel, I mean, we do act as a filter sometimes, and it's difficult to let that filter go. That to me sounds like something out of the movie The Knowing with Nicolas Cage, right?
It's important to keep in mind that Edgar Cayce was a Bible reader every day of his life. He read through the Bible, a little passage, and he taught Sunday school. So for those who are not very Christian, you might say he's biased. And for those who are Christian, you might say, well, he's mixed up in something that's misleading people. I don't know. The proof will be in the pudding, as we say, around the time of the next decade or so, when supposedly these events will start accelerating. And the Ruth Montgomery books, Ruth herself was a Christian who attended, I believe, a Baptist university in Texas back in the Great Depression. She lived into her 80s, and as I mentioned, passed away. She left behind no children and no particular relatives or estate that we can go and check on and see what they think of these forecasts today. I don't know if you could call me any sort of expert, but I did used to correspond with Ruth Montgomery in her final decade. Until the mid-1990s, she lost a lot of her eyesight and found it difficult to read. And I know this sounds pretty wild too, but Edgar Cayce spoke of, quote, Paul who is to come. who would have some amount of influence on Edgar's prophecies. And I read that at an early age, and I nearly forgot it until just within the last year. And here I am on a show and a number of programs promoting a book talking about just that, Edgar Cayce and his prophecies. And my name happens to be Paul. So coincidence? I don't know.
So have you always been had an interest in channeled material then?
Well, this gets down to my hair. The last time I was on a show, someone said, well, he'd be a lot more believable if he didn't have that rug on his head. Well, this is my real hair. I've always worn it this way because I was a Beatle fan even as a boy. And around 1980, I became very sad and depressed and searching for answers when John Lennon was murdered. And that led me to read the Ruth Montgomery series and Edgar Cayce books describing his channeling and her channeling of the spirits. And I was open to reading other things, and I read a few other things, but I tended to gravitate towards Edgar and Ruth and have their books kept with me, and I've pored over them again and again as the decades have gone by. And I don't really have a tremendous knowledge of other psychics and channelers. Here's another wild story. The Bible code books?
Yes.
Someone sent me a decoding of a page from the Bible code and said, Paul, you're in here. Said that the book of Genesis points out your name and your UFO books and like a date. And that kind of blew me away. However, the page he showed me was in English. And of course, the Bible code was written old Hebrew language. So I really don't know about me being foreseen thousands of years ago talking about these matters. I am skeptical myself. I come from a somewhat cynical, skeptical family. And I've had my high school and college years in which I did not care that much for organized religion. And so, like I say, to this day, I'm not a regular churchgoer, and I don't pick up the Bible and read it very much at all. It's kind of difficult reading for me. So
me too.
You can just make what you will of my filtering of what I'm telling you of all these
Absolutely.
sources.
No, makes sense to me. Thank you. Okay, and, well, yeah, I mean, Ruth Montgomery, if you want to check her out, you can still get her books on Amazon.com and .co.uk and most Amazon stores, and there's second-hand copies as well. It'd be very interesting to see some of her books, and of course, Edgar Cayce's books are currently still in print as well. So, how would you want to summarize that book then? I mean, and what you? I mean, the thing is, a pole shift is a serious. I mean, the thing is as well. There are signs that the pole is shifting.
Yes. For instance, there's a native tribe in northern Canada and northern Greenland near the North Pole who are already trying to contact NASA and government leaders saying things are out of whack already here at the North Pole. The sun is at a different angle in the sky, and it sets differently than when we were children, and that the ice is melting rapidly, and familiar landmarks are gone, and that they feel that the Earth has already shifted or tilted a few degrees, and something is very wrong. Something's at the top of the world in particular. And as we know, there have been stories recently in the news saying scientists are alarmed that things are accelerating at an astonishing rate, far faster melting of the poles than what was predicted in the late 1990s and early 2000s. That at this rate, it won't be too long before in the summertime there won't be any ice at all at the North Pole. You'll be able to take a ship over the top of the globe and come back down on the other side. And that's mighty drastic and mighty frightening. So it's displacing water and sending it, pushing down on the surface of the Earth as best I can put it from the scientific reports that I have read online. And it's creating a new bulging of the Earth and new flattening and just eating away at some of the land masses. And this is once again, predicted by Ruth Montgomery's guides in particular. And that's what raises the hair on the back of my neck when I read some of these that we're just almost unable to stop this, that it seems inevitable. And a pole shift is a very serious matter in which many people, but not all, will pass away. We will be injured or die because of the many geophysical changes, such as tsunamis, tidal waves, earthquakes, extremely high winds. And you're looking more and more wise these days, in any sense, if you are a prepper, someone who's prepared for any sort of calamitous event, such as forest fires we've seen here in America, and hurricanes that we've seen in Florida and Texas, and flooding, that if you have an extra supply of food and clothing and fresh water and maybe a backup generator and tools, you're looking pretty smart right now, and it'll be a wise move in the future if you keep this around.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, thank you for that. Now, just moving on to your new book as well, your latest book. There it is, Sexy Alien Races. So, again, as you described at the beginning of this is about them prepping us for a great change, or being here at a time of great change.
Yeah, the book, Sexy Alien Races, takes a little explaining too, but that's what we're here for. I read a story around the year 2000 in a newspaper that American baseball fans were going to the ballpark to bet on anything, hits, runs, errors, etc. And we have in America these costume mascots that run around the field in a little race around the 8th inning, late in the baseball game. So people were going down in the stands and trying to talk to the men and women wearing these costumes and say, you feel good today? You think you're going to win? Are you a good mudder? Do you run on a muddy track or a dry track? Almost like they're at a horse track, a horse racing event. These are human beings in costumes running a silly race. And I thought, that is just hilarious, and it's sad at the same time. So I created a comedy screenplay about this, and I was never quite satisfied. And I wanted to put in messages about why aliens could be here, because there are so many of them in the Nevada area. And I've got a nice list of them built up, and I incorporated them into this book, where you can read a fictional, entertaining story, but read actual facts about UFO tales, including the death of actress Carol Lombard in January of 1942. It was a very little known fact that a UFO was seen over the mountain where she and her airplane collided and crashed, and everyone died very tragically, 21 people besides Carol Lombard. And the government started to look into this according to these documents, and they're heavily redacted, and they were covered up for over 40 years. The government hid them away until a Freedom of Information Act showed that the FBI was deeply involved in checking out mysterious lights and objects in the sky. So that crash happened outside of Las Vegas, and it's something I put in my book, because we all know about Area 51 and supposed crash recoveries that are being tested in the desert right outside of Las Vegas. And I have some of that in the book. The story of Bob Lazar, the famous American scientist who stepped forward in the late 1980s and said, I was there at Area 51, S4, the Special Air Base, where we did have recovered alien craft. He said he saw some briefing papers on alien races that we have either recorded information on or even possibly had communication with. And so I put together the two ideas that alien races are here, and then in sports you have the little mascot races running around a field. And what does the Las Vegas baseball team have as a theme? Well, they're all about aliens. So I created alien races that are sexed up in the book. They are jazzed up to be more entertaining for crowds, and crowds keep showing up at the ball game to bet on the little alien racers, and that's why the book is called Sexy Alien Races. But it should be a lot of fun to read. It's a comedy novel, but it gets serious when it comes to the actual UFO stories in Nevada I included.
Okay. So this is very different to the first book you did, MO 41. Right. Yeah. But obviously, right. still keeping into the idea of some of the real life stories of
Right. I wanted to educate and entertain at the same time and reach young people who may not be familiar with, like Bob Lazar, UFO sightings in Las Vegas, channelers, abductees, contactees, all part of the UFO phenomena.
Yes.
Some of these may be fake, or some of them may be real. They're quite fascinating. And so some of these tales are 30 or more years old. So younger people who enjoy a little naughty comedy, there is some slightly racy material in my book, nothing too profane at all. But I just wanted to reach a different audience and try a different approach, both fact and fiction.
Okay. That's interesting. And so, what is the most interesting story in that book? That's a real factual story as far as you understand it.
I'm glad you asked that. Well, there's two of them, and I'll try to be very quick here. There's a man named Robert O. Dean who used to work in the American military, and he rose fairly high in the Army and was stationed in Europe. And in the early 1960s, he said his supervisor led him on the overnight shift down to a locked facility within Supreme Allied headquarters in France, and showed him the American government has a whole classified report, top secret, about what alien races are coming to Earth. He named at least 5 of them, including the so-called little grays and reptilians and other ones that have been, some of them have been landing peacefully and presenting themselves at air bases, and that this was all kept secret, but Mr. Dean wrote down little notes. He would take the report to the bathroom and hide in the bathroom stall and make notes on what he was reading, and has come forward to say the American government, at least in Europe of the 60s, knows full well alien races are coming here and observing us. He didn't seem to have a reason why, but he said many people in military intelligence know all about this. And a second story is really fascinating. It may be completely unfamiliar to your viewers. On April 18th, 1962, a UFO was sighted over 10 American states, 10, from New York traveling westward to Utah, where it was supposedly seen landing just outside a small town named Eureka. The power went out all over the place, and American citizens in that town started searching for what's going on. Why is our power out? And they saw this ship lift back up into the skies. It seemed to have a lot of sparks and stagger around a little bit. It took off and headed in a different direction. It passed over Las Vegas, where citizens saw it, and the news media photographed it for the Las Vegas Sun newspaper. And it crashed outside Mesquite, Nevada, on government land shortly after the Vegas sighting. And it made newspaper reports the next day across the country. This strange cylindrical or cigar-shaped UFO. And yet, after that, the lid must have been clamped down on media reports, because almost nothing was heard from again. I have a friend who went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, living in Las Vegas in the mid-1980s, and he decided to look into this story. He had a copy of the Las Vegas Sun where this picture of the UFO was recorded, and he found the byline for the photographer, found out in the phone book the photographer had a camera shop, and he went to visit this man. And they made small talk. The man was very congenial. And when he brought up the 1962 UFO case, the guy exploded. He was furious. Don't you talk about this. You get out of here right now. I never want to hear about this again. Well, my buddy was stunned. And even more so, he said, when he got home and he got a mysterious phone call from a male voice that warned him, you don't want to go into this story. This is how people end up dead. He named him by name. This unnamed caller on the phone knew who my buddy was, knew his parents, or at least referred to them by name, and said, you will not go forward on this tale. This is not to be recorded in any sense. And so he obviously hung up, and my friend said he was just stunned. He was very, very scared, and needless to say, he did not go forward on the story. But it's interesting to note that the American media must have been clamped down on in '62, and it was still in effect in the mid-1980s. If you want to learn more about it, I've got it in a chapter in my book, or you can go online. A UFO reporter named Kevin Randall has done a very fine job of looking this up, and there seems to be real credence into this being a very amazing lost UFO crash story that went largely overall unnoticed. I personally decided to look up President Kennedy's records. He was in power at the time, and unfortunately, he had just taken off that day by Air Force One to Palm Beach, Florida, where he spent the next week on vacation, and no record exists of the people he met or phone calls he made. So I wasn't able to get a lot of data on it to add to it, but it's still overall another Las Vegas UFO story that you can read about in Sexy Alien Races from ArgusBooks.com.
Okay. Well, that's thank you for sharing that story. Okay, and where would you see the direction of your work going now? Because to me, it's gone in a very interesting direction.
Well, I've written this in comedy form, and I've sent it to a Hollywood producer I know, and he's already talking about possibly optioning it to create a movie or a TV show. So that's all very nice, but quite often books get optioned and then it goes nowhere. But I thought I would write a sequel. I also have a project I'm working about the last year or two on regarding an American president who may have had his own amazing extraterrestrial encounter. And I'm putting together as many facts as I can get. It was a long, long time ago, but it's an exciting story too, and I hope to be on your show to talk about it.
Well, that does sound another interesting story. Yeah, well, and how long do your books normally take to put together?
Some of them I've had the threads and notes for a long time, and others, such as the Treasure Keys to Christ's Return, I only got started on that the day after my Jesus Christ dream, and it came out in, I believe, March. So I got it done together pretty quick within a matter of months. Sexy Alien Races originally began as a screenplay many years ago, and I came back to it and filled it out in novel form, where you can put more comedy and more detail in than a script. And so I'm really pleased with the results. And on the back cover, there's a book reviewer who says, "This is a wild and hilarious satire. It is a must read." And so every writer would kill for that for his book. And I got it right off the bat. And I don't want to seem like bragging or boasting, but that's just the facts. And I'm hoping you'll enjoy it too. And you'll come to the same agreement there that it was entertaining and educational at the same time.
Excellent. Okay, well, is there any sort of final message you want to give to the audience, Paul?
In a few days, Donald Trump is supposed to release information on JFK, and they're after him to please release data on UFOs if you know of any. And supposedly his reaction to UFOs is, I'm not a fan of that. So don't count on it, but let's keep our fingers crossed that at least on the Kennedy mystery, we'll learn many more facts within maybe a week. And we will also learn more about UFOs and what our government knows and has been covering up. And keep our eyes on Mount Vesuvius. That is a tip-off that we are on the road to an eventual polar shift of the planet. Hopefully Vesuvius will keep quiet, but if it does, it's going to be a huge disaster since there's over 1 million people living around its slopes in Italy. And supposedly earthquakes will happen in California within a few weeks or months. Edgar Casey and the Ruth Montgomery Guide's big ones. So these are all things to keep our eyes on in the future, and I'm going to keep hunkered down right here at this desk and keep writing.
Well, listen, Paul Blake Smith, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure. Hope I didn't talk too much.
No, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we've come to an end on today's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests by going to themoreshow.com, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.